Well, hello and welcome back to another installment of the crossover series, a series of videos in which I discuss a hypothetical situation in which characters from Fairy Tail end up in the Yu-Gi-Oh world a la Edolas, and instead of using magic, they have to play a children's card game in order to solve their problems, and what decks they would use in said situation. If you're new here, I already made 2 videos in the series. I'll leave the links in the description below, so go check them out. For those of you unfamiliar, I pick the decks based on the character's powers and abilities, and I provide an example deck list after explaining my reasons, just in case you wanna try out some of them. And without further ado, let's get the show running, this time with the Grand Magic Games section. However, I'll only be covering the main players of each guild, both to save time and because some of the characters didn't even showcase their magic during the show, so we don't know what magic they use. With that being said, let's start with the perpetually second place guild in the Grand Magic Games, Lamia Scale, and their ace, Jura. Jura uses a type of earth magic that allows him to harden the earth and manipulate it as he sees fit. It is said that he can make even the tiniest sand as tough as iron, which earned him the nickname Iron Rock Jura. So I thought a rock-hard archetype like Megalith would be perfect for him. It's an archetype of Earth attribute rock-type monsters that are all ritual monsters. However, unlike other ritual monsters, they don't need to use ritual spells to summon themselves. Instead, the monsters act as ritual spells, being able to ritual summon other monsters. And the name Megalith sounds tough and hard, fitting Jura quite well. The next member of Lamia Scale I'll be discussing is Sherria. She uses Sky God Slayer magic, a powerful form of wind magic meant for battling the gods themselves. It's a strong offensive magic and also a strong defensive magic because it gives her the ability to heal other people as well as herself. And for her I've selected a Simorgh deck. It's an archetype consisting of both wind attribute and dark attribute winged beast monsters, which I think is fitting seeing as all of Sherria's attacks take form of black wind currents. And all of the boss monsters in the deck look as majestic and divine birds, which is the primary reason I picked this deck for her. The next notable member of Lamia Scale is Leon, but since I already said in the first video that since he uses the same magic as Grey, he should use the same deck as him, maybe a slightly different build, we'll skip him this time. Moving on to Blue Pegasus and the Tri-Man. Starting with Eve, who uses snow magic. And since he uses a lot of attacks containing the words snow, blizzard and white, I decided to put together a deck using cards with those words in their names. Some of the monsters that use ice counters have some synergy with each other, but the others are here mostly for XC summoning some powerful monsters from the extra deck. And I threw in some strong generic traps, cause God knows this deck needs all the support it can get. Next up is Ren, who uses air magic. And he can also manipulate air and wind to battle his opponents, so for him I picked another one of the wind attribute decks that Yu-Gi-Oh has, namely Gusto, or however you pronounce it. I don't really have a strong reason for picking this one, it's just that the other ones I was considering didn't really seem to fit him well, so I picked this one by process of elimination. Anyway, it's a synchro deck, meaning it has a lot of ways to special summon its monsters from the deck or your hand, but strangely enough, most of them rely on your own monsters being destroyed by battle, meaning you're either waiting for your opponent to attack your monsters or you crash into your opponent's monsters to get your plays going, but luckily the extra deck monsters provide some protection in this regard. And the last of the Tri-Men is Hibiki, who uses the magic known as Archive, which is basically like the internet in the Fairy Tail world. It allows Hibiki to access all kinds of information and even share them with his allies. So a deck like Spyro that can gather information about your opponent's deck and then use that information to further its plays would be a pretty good fit for Hibiki in my opinion. One of the deck's most basic plays is to summon Spyro Gear Drone, which allows you to look at the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck and return them in any order. And then you can use the effects of other Spyro monsters like Spyro Super Agent, which require you to know the type of card your opponent has at the top of their decks. And finally, the man who taught the Tri-Men everything they know, the strongest mage of Blue Pegasus, the man, the myth, the legend, Ichiya. He uses perfume magic, which, as the name would suggest, utilizes different perfumes for various effects, both supportive and offensive. So for him, I couldn't pick anything other than Aroma. It's an archetype that focuses on keeping your life points higher than your opponent's, and every monster has an effect that's only active when your life points are higher than your opponent's, and another one that activates when you gain life points. But yeah, for the man who uses perfume as his main weapon, I couldn't pick anything other than an archetype whose name literally means beautiful scent. Moving on to Quattro Cerberus and their only representative in this video, Bacchus. He uses a type of magic that allows him to focus magical power onto the palms of his hands to strengthen his attacks. And he uses it in combination with a martial art that focuses on palm strikes. So for him I picked a dual avatar deck. It's a martial art themed deck that focuses on 2 effect monsters and cards that spawn dual avatar tokens, which can then be utilized to activate the effect monster's effect or used for fusion summons with the effect monsters. And as those monsters evolve into stronger fusion monsters, so does the power in their fists and feet, which kinda reminded me of Bacchus, and that's why I picked the deck for him. And now for Mermaid Hill and their only representative in this video, Kagura. She can use gravity magic, but is mostly shown using her swordsmanship in battles. So because she uses a Japanese style longsword, and her overall demeanor that's kinda samurai-like, for her I picked the 6th Samurai archetype. It's a jack of all trades archetype, being able to adapt to all the new summoning mechanics that were introduced in the game after its release, and is also one of my personal favorite archetypes. And if you're wondering how the gravity part of her abilities fit into this, you obviously haven't played against this deck. Back in its heyday, and even now if they open the nuts and you don't have any interruptions, or not enough interruptions, and the deck just keeps going and going, you're certainly feeling the pressure. And this is the part where I would talk about Raventail, but I'm just gonna do like Noxus and shake them off, because they ultimately proved irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. It's certainly not because they use some strange magic that I couldn't equate with any Yu-Gi-Oh decks, oh no. Instead, we're just going to move on to the favorites of the Grand Magic Games betting booths, until Fairy Tail kicked their ass. Of course, I'm talking about Sabertooth. I already covered Sting and Rogue in the first video, so the next one on the list is Rufus. He uses Memory Make, magic that allows him to utilize other forms of magic he's seen before and memorized. He can use them individually or even combine multiple forms of magic into one. He also has the ability to forget magic, rendering any form of magic he's seen at least once completely useless against him. So being reliant on his opponent to use magic against him and being able to neutralize it just screams Psyframes to me. Psyframe is an archetype of hand trap monsters, and they are able to negate either monster, spell or trap effects their opponent uses and special summon themselves on the field. They also have to special summon a level 6 normal monster called Psyframe Driver from the hand, deck or graveyard, and since they are own tuners, they can even synchro summon right away even during your opponent's turn in combination with their field spell. And the synchro monsters can then cripple your opponent even further, that's why they are very annoying to play against. Next up is Orga, another God Slayer, this time the Lightning God Slayer. Like the name would suggest, his magic element is lightning, and he uses it to overpower his opponents in a single shot. So for him I picked Batteryman, the first Thunder type OTK deck. They have good capability to swarm the field with big monsters and just swing at your opponent for game in one turn. That's why I think they are a good fit for Orga, seeing as they both like to take as little time to deal with their opponent. And the last Sabertooth wizard I'll be talking about is Minerva. She uses a magic called Territory, which allows her to manipulate space and any spatial region in her line of sight. She can use it for everything ranging from blocking attacks, creating explosions in the air, and even teleport herself and other people from one place to the other. And she can even summon one of the 18 battle gods. So a deck like Mech Knight Invoked, which plays around with column positioning and can special summon powerful extra deck monsters, would be a great fit for her in my opinion. The Mech Knight main deck monsters all have the same effect that allows them to special summon themselves in a column that has 2 or more cards in it, so card positioning is very important for the strategy. And the Invoked engine is there for extra support, providing a means for easy summoning of powerful extra deck monsters. And now, since this didn't take as much time as I thought it would, I get the chance to talk about some other characters that appeared in the Grand Magic Games arc, namely the Garo Knights. Starting with their leader, Kama. He uses Sights. I don't know if there's any magic with them involved, However, they have been shown following around a target that's been branded with a specific mark. But other than that, yeah, it's just sights. So for him, I picked the X-Saber deck. They are a synchro-based archetype with warrior, beast warrior and beast type monsters that was pretty strong back in the day, but power creep's a thing, so they're not very strong right now. But they do have a guy with a sight among their monsters, so that's primarily why I picked them for him. Next we have Neppa, who uses acid magic. It's a magic that, you guessed it, allows him to create acid, and that acid is strong enough to melt rocks in seconds. And for him, I picked a deck whose main goal is to put a monster called Acid Golem on your opponent's side of the field with no Xyz material beneath it. That way your opponent loses 2000 life points at the start of his turn and he cannot special summon any monsters. And if you set up your field with at least one negate beforehand, you're almost guaranteed to OTK the next turn. Next up is Kamika, who uses a magic called Paper Blizzard. It's a magic that allows her to manipulate paper, and based on the paper's color, it can have different properties. They can be used to create shields, fire, a light that blinds enemies, and even poison. But since there aren't any paper-based decks in Yu-Gi-Oh!, at least that I'm aware of, do correct me if I'm wrong, I went with a deck that has monsters of different types and attributes, mirroring her ability to change the paper's properties by changing its color. And that would be the Nemesis deck. All of their lower level monsters have the effect to special summon themselves from the hand by shuffling one of your banished monsters into the deck. And the higher level monsters have a floodgate effect, paralyzing your opponent like one of her paper colors. Then we have Cosmos, who uses plant magic. It allows her to summon various kinds of plants, including carnivorous one, and create spores that explode or put their victims to sleep, from which they will never wake up. So for her I picked a deck full of plant monsters, focusing on the plant princesses. Mostly because in one of the scenes in the anime, she was standing in the middle of a big flower, and that reminded me of the artwork from the plant princesses, and that's why I picked that deck. And lastly we have Uosuke, who uses terrain effect magic. That magic allows him to manipulate a certain area however he likes. He can create lava, whirlpools, even control the gravity in the area. And that's why for him I picked a deck that can also alter the playing field, by completely decimating it with destruction and banish effects. It's a deck that centers around summoning the topologic link monsters, which all have effects that either destroy or banish cards when a monster is special summoned to a zone a link monster points to. And then when the field is cleared, you can go for the attack with some big extra deck monsters and go for game. And that's it for this installment of the crossover series. But there are still a lot of characters I have yet to cover, so see you in the next one. Until then, bye!